You're listening to the ADHD Support Talk Radio podcast. ADHD Support Talk Radio is sponsored by addclasses.com. Sign up now for a free webinar by going to www.addclasses.com. This is your co-host, Tara McGillicuddy, and today I am back with my other co-host, Lynne Edris, and we are going to be talking about getting back on course. So Lynn, before we get started, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself and how people can get in touch with you?
Sure, absolutely. Again, my name is Lynne Edris. I am a productivity and ADHD coach. I empower professionals to take control of their time and their lives so that they can fulfill their potential more easily and have more time and energy for what matters most to them. You can learn more about me and what I do at www.coachingadvantages.com.
And I'm Tara McGillicuddy, the co-host, founder of ADHD Support Talk Radio. I'm an ADHD coach. I also help people shift their energy, be more productive and happier in life. You can learn more about me and the services and resources I offer by going to taramcgillicuddy.com. So today we're going to be talking about getting back on course. And one of the reasons Lynn and I decided to talk about this is because right now we're both relating to this because we both had some different things going on in our lives, which threw us off course, and we're trying to get back on. So Lynn, where do you think we should get started with it?
I think it's important for all of us to remember that anytime we make a change or anytime we have to make a transition of any kind, like that's hard with ADHD, right? Transitions are hard for us. We have to shift our attention and regulate our attention differently. And that's a lot harder for us than it is for the rest of the world. And anytime you have any kind of an interruption, whether it's a planned interruption, like for me, I have been traveling, working remotely. It was a planned interruption, but some interruptions are unplanned. Like Tara's dealing with coming back from an unplanned interruption.
Well, I had a planned interruption combined with an unplanned interruption. I was house sitting for my parents while they were away, and I took a bit of a fall, or a lot of a fall, and hurt myself. So I, had that planned interruption of being away where, they live a couple hours from me. I also had that unplanned interruption of being in pain and falling. And so mine's combined, but I think the unplanned fall, because there was more to it, really was abrupt and caused a lot of stress. And I'm in that, okay, it's time to get back on course. And now that I'm feeling better, I can actually sit down at the computer and bend my knee. It's time for me to get back on course.
Absolutely. So the thing I always want my clients to think about when we're talking about getting back on course or getting back on track or whatever is to start by thinking about clearly what does on course mean for you, right? What does on course mean? Does it mean getting back to the projects you had going on? That may be a part of it. Does it mean getting back to a schedule that you had or something that you were working on that you were making progress or trying to start making progress on? I mean, really looking at how do I define on course for me? It can be hard, right? And it kind of depends. It depends on, what you have going on and what works for you and, what the interruption was.
Yeah, because sometimes we just can expect we're going to get back home, back wherever, or even if it wasn't an event that took us out of our home, it's going to get back to what we were doing.
Right.
And sometimes it doesn't happen automatically more often than not. And part of it's because we were in something else, logically, physically, energetically, and we haven't made that transition to bridge what we did, the change to what we're going to get back to. And sometimes we don't know what it is, or we haven't really looked at it. And that is really important. What does it mean to be back on track? And sometimes it's related to your personal life, your work life, your social life, whatever. And, maybe that's something just in general, maybe even if you don't have a planned or an unplanned event that's going to take you off track, what does it mean? What's your ideal life? Maybe that's something to really look at and jot out, write it down, have it. So when, if life happens, whether it's planned or unplanned, what you want to get back to.
Absolutely. So taking a look at, what does it look like when you feel like you're on course,
Mhm.
right? Does that, what does that mean? And one of the things that's hard is any kind of interruption, whether it's positive or whether it's negative, whether it's planned or whether it's unplanned, gives us a lot to transition back from, right? Not when you are off course, whether it's an illness or a vacation or some other sort of interruption, planned or unplanned, it impacts like all the different areas of your life. So just
Yes.
thinking about, what does it mean to be back on course, for work? What does it mean to be back on course in my personal life? What does it mean to be back on course in terms of my relationships, in terms of any kind of spiritual elements, of my life, in terms of the creative elements of my life? So really thinking about, what does my life look like? And we're not talking about your fantasy life. We're talking about
Mhm.
your actual life when you feel like you're, for the most part, humming along where you want to be. You feel like you're functioning well, or as well as you feel like you're often functioning. What does that look like? Like really concretely thinking about that. Then when an interruption is coming, a planned interruption is coming, you can plan ahead to set yourself up for what I call reentry. Like,
Mhm.
so when you're going to be away, or you're going to be traveling, or there's a holiday, or you're going to have some time off, or whatever it is, you can take a little time on the front end to make sure that you coming back, you re-entering into your sort of normal life, whatever that means for you, what that looks like. So you can do some things in the beginning, kind of on the front end, to make that a little bit easier. But
Mhm.
if you also think about that ahead of time, and you have that captured in some way that you can come back to it, those unplanned interruptions, those unplanned transitions also are easier to come back to.
Yeah. And you can always tweak it. You can have like a basic structure, a guideline that you're going to get back to. But sometimes I just know in the past couple of weeks when I've been just basically sitting and letting my leg heal, I've come up with some great ideas for ADHD related products, other business, other resources and classes. And I am not coming back to exactly what I was doing before, but I still have that baseline. Okay, I have projects, I have events, I have stuff that I'm doing, but I can supplement that or tweak it. I mean, that's something, even if you
Absolutely.
have that guide, that thing to come back to, you can give yourself permission to add to it, take away from it, to tweak it after you've got back on course or started getting back on course. And your course is going to more than likely be a little bit different, or maybe a lot different than it was before, but just have something.
Absolutely. And using it as an opportunity. So
Yes.
it could be something that reminds you of the tools and the habits and the things that support you the most,
Mhm.
right? The things that are most helpful for you in your ADHD functioning. It could be just, kind of having your calendar set up, but anytime it could be lots of different things, right? What the things that you lean on, the things that support you, and, kind of what that framework of on course looks like for you. But then when you're coming back, it's also an opportunity, right?
Mhm.
An opportunity to review, an opportunity to revise, an opportunity to tweak going forward, not to throw everything out that you've been working on or that you've made progress on, but to really take a look at, where do you want to keep moving? What do you want to keep paying attention to? What do you want to keep moving forward? Is there something that could use some improvement? Is there something that you'd like to let go for a little while and move on to something else, right?
Mhm.
A transition is hard, but it can also be an opportunity if you let it be an
Yeah.
opportunity.
It can be hard, it can be challenging, and sometimes we're in that like middle place of going from one thing to the other. It can be very stressful and we can be overwhelmed.
Yes.
So, I mean, one of the things just to start with is simply just breathing, taking a few deep breaths, breathing, de-stressing. That might be something, if there's some type of self-care routine that, or some, maybe not a routine, something like getting massage, doing something like that, that might help de-stress you where you're in that middle, that transition of the change, that whatever you just came from, whatever you're going back to, that can be helpful. But, and also understanding that the overwhelm, the stress, those type of things are, I don't know if normal is the right word, but they're common,
Yes.
and be okay. How are you going to de-stress? How are you going to reduce that overwhelm? And part of it might just be, looking at your calendar, like, oh, that's what I was going to do. That's what I'm going to do. But be okay that you're maybe in that place of overwhelm and stress in that middle of that transition.
And expect it and know that it's just part of life and that you've been overwhelmed before and you've gotten yourself through it before.
Yes, yes.
I often remind my clients to tell themselves, like, yes, it's uncomfortable to feel overwhelmed. Yes, it's uncomfortable to not know, to not have direction or to not feel like how to get yourself back on course. But you've so far had a 100% survival rate of feeling overwhelmed, a 100% survival rate of not feeling like you have good direction for yourself and figuring it out, right? You absolutely will get to the other side of it. So expecting it, realizing it's okay. And kind of, I always tell my clients, like, just sit with it, just feel it and acknowledge it. And then just like, let it be. It's stressing out or resisting or trying to avoid the feeling of overwhelm or lack of direction or not knowing which way to turn next isn't going to make it better. And it isn't going to help you figure it out. It's actually going to make it easier for you to find yourself procrastinating or avoiding or doing the kinds of things that we do to escape that aren't necessarily helpful or aren't necessarily going to move us toward the lives that we want for ourselves. So just acknowledge it, feel it, let it be, and do some things, first of all, to be nice to yourself. Like, it's okay. I'm overwhelmed. I always say, call it what it is. I'm overwhelmed. I don't know where to start. Saying that out loud sometimes can be just a release that lets you realize, okay, this is what I do to find myself, direction or to find where to go next.
Yeah. Like the last time or another time I was in a situation where I felt this overwhelm or stress. How did it stop? You can go back and, it might be a practical solution. It might be your tools. It might be just simply breathing. But that's the big thing. You don't want to spend a lifetime in overwhelm, but just moments or however it is, it's part of the process.
It is.
Get out
it's
of
to be
overwhelm.
expected.
Yes.
Absolutely. And it's, it's not a death sentence. Absolutely. You've gotten through it before and you will get through it again. So really, like, taking an opportunity in advance when you can to help set yourself up for getting back on course when you need to, whatever that means for those planned kind of interruptions and also for those unplanned interruptions. Like, what do you know helps you the most? What are the things that you really lean on when you are frazzled or frantic or having a hard time reorienting yourself after an interruption? Those are sort of your ADHD essentials. Those are, I always call them your scaffolding, making sure that you know what those things are for you. Is it self-care? Is it exercise? Is it meditation? Is it your to-do list? Is it, really taking some time to sit with your calendar and planning things out? Is it all of the above? I mean, what are some of the things that come to mind for you, Tara, in terms of kind of those essentials that support us?
Well, I think for me, it's definitely the breathing, just slowing down and breathing, but having reevaluating and evaluating even before I go to my planner, my calendar, the things I have, like asking myself, is now the time? I don't necessarily ask myself those specific words, but I have this like process where I evaluate and what can I change? Because for me, and I don't know if everyone else is like that, when I'm hit with a transition or something abrupt, a stressful situation, that is a time for me to make changes. Like it's probably like, okay, Tara, maybe it'd be a good idea to have made the changes 3 months ago. The fact that you didn't make them 3 months ago, now's time because you have no choice. So sometimes those, for me, an abrupt fall, there's some time to make changes.
It's a reset.
A reset. And, now as we're recording this, it's the beginning of spring. I think seasonal changes like winter to spring, summer to fall, those are good times to have that evaluation, looking at your life. What do I want to make any changes? So when an unexpected change comes up, it's not that abnormal that you're doing that reevaluating. So I think that's abrupt. For me, the self-care, I mean, I came back from a fall and I had a massage scheduled and I'm like, I can't go to the massage because I'm not going to go to the table. And then I ended up going because my body was so stressed. Like was holding on to the trauma of the fall and not just the pain. So for me, that's self-care. listening to music. Self-care,
Yeah,
I think, is the huge one for me. And I intuitively think it's like self-care is a big one for everyone. Like
I think it is too.
making sure you're getting enough sleep, upping the vitamin C and whatever, supplements you might take, making sure you're getting enough nutrients and exercise. For me, knowing, because I couldn't really walk for a couple of weeks, I'm getting better. That's something that I have to, like, how can I do something, replace the exercise with something healthy, like not chocolate
Yeah.
chip cookies,
Right.
obviously,
Right.
but stretching and
Is there something you
breathing.
can do now that right now you can't do the things that you normally would do that would be helpful for
And I
you?
think but also giving myself permission, going back to that overwhelm, giving myself permission to feel the negativity of the
Yeah.
pain of the, okay, I'm a little disappointed because when I had planned to come back, I wanted to go back to Pilates and reach my next goal there. And I'm like, and I was able to replace it with something different, like thinking about new business plans, new ideas. I could tap into my creativity. So for me, I think not living in a fantasy world, but where before I wasn't really planning, now I can kind of do a different type of planning. Did that answer your
Absolutely.
question?
Yeah, it did. It
Okay.
making space for something else,
Yes.
right? That's
Yeah.
really, and it's a different kind of something that you enjoy and a different kind of something that is good for you. So
Yeah.
self-care is, we often talk about like sort of the practical functional things like
Mhm.
breathing and
Yep.
meditation and nutrition and exercise and sleep and those kinds of things. But there's another element to it as well. I call it feeding your soul, like doing the
Yes.
stuff that you enjoy, doing the things that you're good at, doing the things that recharge you and replenish you
Mhm.
are part of that too. So looking for other ways to get some of that when you're feeling overwhelmed or you're
Mhm.
having a difficult time with a transition, so that it isn't all like yuck and stress and all of that too, not as an escape from everything else, but in addition to the other things that you want to get back on course,
Mhm.
making sure that you up that self-care a
Yeah.
little bit, all of the pieces.
I think reaching out to other people for support, whether it's an ADHD coach, a trusted friend, I think that can sometimes help you get back into centered and grounded when you transition from something to the next thing too.
Absolutely. And talking it out with someone who like can help you talk it through, well, it can also help you get clear on, what are you overwhelmed about? Because a lot of the times when we're overwhelmed or we're feeling like we're off track or whatever, it's just this sort of nebulous, amorphous, I'm not where I want to be feeling,
Mhm.
or this shut down feeling, or the I don't know which way to turn feeling, or my favorite I always talk about is the ADD quicksand feeling, where you just feel like
Yes.
everything's hard and everything is kind of you're kind of pushing harder than you want to. But to be able to talk that through with someone or
Mhm.
journal it out for
Yeah.
yourself, what is it specifically that has me overwhelmed? What is it specifically that's underneath this? What is it,
Yep.
what am I thinking about? What do I need to adjust?
And I think you're more than likely you're not going to get back on course right away and have everything back where it was, but starting with one step, it can be small steps, just taking action on something, taking your suitcase from the hallway to the closet type of thing, just taking that one step, or opening your calendar, looking at your calendar, making that one phone call. It creates like a ripple effect where you do
Absolutely.
one thing, you build up that momentum, process, be aware of the fact that you took action, you were successful with that one small step, or it could be a big step, but with that one step, you gradually, most of us, it'll be gradually, some people it's right away, but it's going to be gradual for the majority
Most
of
of
us.
us.
Yeah, you start getting back on course, and your
Absolutely.
course might be a bit different. It might be a lot different than it was post or pre-transition.
Absolutely. It's really a lot of it is about awareness and giving yourself permission.
Mm.
And if there are transitions that are coming up, interruptions that are
Yeah.
coming up, you can plan for them in advance, including kind of your getting back on track, any rituals, that can be really helpful. If you have starting rituals, if you have rituals that help you sort of re-enter, if you have things that you do in advance that set you up to make that easier, doing what you can. But I think remembering to be nice to yourself,
Yes.
remembering to feel what you feel and let it be and let it go and know that you'll get past it and you'll get through it. And hopefully when you look back on it, you'll have seen some shifts and some revisions and some things that were positive that came out of this transition.
Yeah, and preparing ahead is a good thing too. Like I was preparing for my trip, you were preparing for your trip, and I had some unexpected things happen on my trip. So the fact that I was preparing for something else, I can still use that basic concept of what I was preparing for, even though something unexpected happened, you can still, you can tweak it. But I think that's really important, is knowing things are going to come up. And there might be something that that maybe you have a wedding, maybe you have a vacation, maybe you have something like that you can plan ahead for. But just the act of planning ahead for anything is going to help you when the unexpected things, you have a framework to go back to, even if you have to tweak it because it's not the same exact situation, you still have that basic framework. And you could have a journal, you could have a notebook, you could have some type of folder or something that you call it transition, getting back on course or something to that idea, because you talked about reminding yourself. And sometimes you're not going to remember, but if it's in that guide, that plan, that whatever it is that you can look back at or listen to, it's going to help you.
Absolutely. We always think we're going to remember, right? And I think that's sort of like one of the big ADHD, not so nice jokes we play on ourselves is we think we're going to remember. It's not going to be that big of an interruption, but I don't know about you. It doesn't take much of an interruption for me to completely forget. And sometimes it can be something that I've done for a long time that really supports me. And, it can feel like I've never done it before when I've been interrupted for even kind of a small period of time. So having something to lean on can be really helpful.
And there's so many ways you can, I know my iPhone, I can program it, when I'm in a certain space at a certain time, it can have a pop-up asking me something like that. I don't use it that often, but you could have something set up, if it's a planned thing and you're going to be back and, maybe the next morning you have a reminder going off, say, look at your project thing, look at this, or asking you a question. Have you prepared to get back on course? I mean, there's different ways. And these are examples. I think each one of us is different, but there's so many tools we can sometimes be overwhelming because there's so many, but there are tools that we can use, and we don't have to rely on just our brain, our mind, our memory, because when we have those transitions, our executive functioning skills are not working as well as they may have before we went through whatever it was we went through.
Absolutely. Any kind of stress is going to impede your executive functioning. So it could be something as simple as a note to yourself on your desk or on your kitchen counter when you come back. It could be a note to yourself in your calendar for the day that you come back. It could be reminders, alarms. It could be
making an appointment with somebody else, asking somebody, hey, when I get back, you want to go let's make an appointment to go out for coffee, or will you call me and ask me this? I mean, there's different things.
Absolutely.
We're just, doing a little bit of
take
mind
them as
dump
seeds
right now, but but I think that's a thing, not just hope, but realistically letting people know we can get back on course. Absolutely. They maybe take a little bit of time and work, but we can get back on course, and it may be even better than the last time we were on course.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just be nice to you. Know that it happens to all of us, and that you'll get where you need to be when you need to be there. I mean,
be kind and gentle to yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. Good so Lynn, do we have anything else when it comes to getting back on course and transitions that we haven't mentioned today that might be helpful?
I just think the notion of, setting yourself up for reentry, the notion of, I always call it leaving yourself a trail of breadcrumbs so that when you do come back, whether it's for me, it's from a Friday to a Monday, I leave a pretty good trail of breadcrumbs of what I was working on and what I was leaving behind and, what I want to get back to, because I know that I can't trust my memory. Sometimes I'm a rock star and I remember crap that surprises me, but more often than not, it's just not reliable. So me expecting that, it's going to be, it's all going to come back to me on the spot is really unrealistic. So that, think about how you can leave yourself that trail of breadcrumbs to make your own life a little bit easier.
Yeah. And I think the thing I want to leave people with or remind them is about that self-care is essential. And
Yeah.
like I just said it a couple minutes ago, being kind and gentle with yourself. That's not letting it slide. That's not allowing yourself to make excuses. Being kind and gentle and practicing that self-care is so essential.
It really is.
Yeah. So we're going to end today's episode. Thank you so much, Lynn. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to listen. If you like this episode, leave us a positive review on iTunes if you haven't done that already, or make a comment if you're watching or listening to us on iTunes. And be sure to stop by ADHDsupporttalk.com where you can access additional episodes. Thanks so much, Lynn. Thank you, everyone.
You.